Football Nation.
Since 1998, Lanco Group has been providing superior civil engineering solutions and advice to developers, local government and service authorities across Australia. Lanco Group is known for delivering sustainable, efficient solutions. By working closely with clients, Lanco Group is able to meet the complex infrastructure requirements for residential, commercial and industrial developments on time, on budget. Find out more at lancogroup.com.au. Lanco Group, your business partner for engineering solutions.
Welcome to a brand new EPL show. We've had the EPL show in the past, we've had the English football show in the past, but we're back and better than ever for an English Premier League specific show here on FNR Football Nation Radio. I'm Nick Hughes, together with Josh Parrish. We're coming back out of the international break. We're getting back into the Premier League action. We're heading into that fantastic winter period where the games just come thick and fast, and I cannot wait for how it's going to shape up heading into the new year, because the title race is already very interesting. The top four race is already very interesting. We've had plenty of managerial movements over this international break as well, so lots to unpack ahead of the Premier League's return. But first of all, Josh, we've just had a fantastic hour on the Green Room. How are you going? How are you feeling for this little run of Premier League fixtures that we have?
Well, it's always a little sad when you go into the international break and, some of the storylines, won't continue to develop as they have. But what has happened in this international break? And let's not beat around the bush. The man here is wearing a Liverpool jersey. You got to be excited to see Stevie G back in the Premier League, even if it is with Aston Villa.
Absolutely. For two reasons. I think one, him leaving Rangers, I think I now don't have to choose who I like to get behind in terms of Steven Gerrard and Ange Postecoglou in the Scottish Premier League. But him coming to Aston Villa, as much as I really don't want to think about the day when it does inevitably come that Jurgen Klopp leaves Anfield, I think Steven Gerrard coming into the Premier League just gives that hint that he is one step closer to potentially taking the top job at Liverpool, which is something certainly very exciting. I think it's been coming. He's been linked with previous jobs, the Newcastle one in particular. Recently, obviously Eddie Howe has taken that one of a few new managerial appointments, yes, that will begin heading out of this international break. But to start, I think we will discuss the international break itself. Plenty going on in the World Cup qualifiers, and where Portugal and Italy have had their struggles, England certainly haven't in the last week or so. 15 goals scored against Albania and San Marino, 5-0 against Albania, 10-0 against England, and a few breakout performers. Maybe a bit later on we'll touch more on our thoughts on the Premier League season so far. But a couple of guys, Emil Smith-Rowe, Conor Gallagher, getting their first look-ins for the national team, which is very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Conor Gallagher has come out of nowhere. Crystal Palace have been a bit of a revelation this season. I think when we did our preview show, you were very low on Patrick Vieira and Crystal Palace. You swung for the fences on a relegation, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
But they've defied the doubters and are playing very, very good football. I've been really impressed with his sort of tactical acumen and the way he's adapted in specific games. I really liked how they set up against Manchester City by being a little bit more aggressive in terms of their defensive structure and actually fronting the midfield and preventing the balls from being played into the likes of Gundogan and Bernardo Silva when they take up those pockets, and not just sticking everyone behind the ball and hoping for the best. And, I think the managers had a big part to play in that, but also Conor Gallagher, who's on loan from Chelsea, I believe.
Yes, yeah, correct.
He's so energetic. He's covering so much ground, but also he's demonstrated quite a coolness and I guess a certain poise in the final third and in front of goal for a player with very little top flight experience. Is really striking to see in his first few outings. So a bolter, to be sure, for the England squad, but a welcome one. And I think Republic of Ireland fans will just be searching Ancestry.com now, because Gallagher sounds suspiciously eligible, if I say so myself.
Yeah, we know there's plenty of history between England and Ireland in terms of international representation. Jack Grealish, Declan Rice, just to name a couple. It'd be
nice to get one back.
It would.
It would have been nice to get one back, but he's played in a qualifier now, has he? So he's cap tied, and I think it's another one that the Ireland fans will be ruining in the years to come, I should say.
Unfortunately for them. But I think the Irish themselves, I think, have had a decent little qualification campaign. But it's an interesting one with Gallagher, because he had his had his Premier League chance last year with West Bromwich Albion, and he really didn't take it. He had a couple of fantastic loan spells within the same season. The first half of the 1920 season at Charlton, who up until the point that he left, really under Lee Bowyer a couple of years ago, were really flying after just being promoted from League One. He was a terrific part of that. First 6 months of the season, he then moved on to another loan spell for Swansea. Swansea went on to reach the Championship playoff final. Ryan Brewster was also on loan there and scoring plenty of goals. But like I said, he then took that step into the Premier League with West Brom. It didn't work out for him. It didn't work out for West Brom. And then he comes into Crystal Palace, and maybe it's a change of system, a different role that he's being used in. But he seems to really have found his feet. And it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward, because Chelsea have that sort of interesting history with academy products. For every Mason Mount that is heavily depended upon by the last couple of managers and been very good. You have a Tammy Abraham story that looks like he had the potential, but is ultimately sold on. And I think even in the summer just gone, Tino Livramento and a couple of those lesser known guys, have sort of moved on before they were given their opportunity. So it'll be interesting if Gallagher can sort of wrestle his way into the Chelsea team more permanently. Emile Smith-Rowe as well, I think, is a big one to talk about. Pakua Frimpong behind the glass is waving her hands in the air. Scored his first England goal on his debut appearance. He of course, and just like Gallagher, neither of them were actually picked in the initial squad by Gareth Southgate. They only came in because there were a slew of players ended up back at their clubs halfway through the international break with little niggling injuries. I think Jordan Henderson, Marcus Rashford were a couple of them. But Smith-Rowe has been really, ever since he came into the Arsenal team sort of halfway through last season, has been a real breath of fresh air. Arsenal were crying out for that creative number 10 player. A lot of people were looking at Mesut Ozil's lack of registration in any sort of competition and thinking, what's going on there? But in Emile Smith-Rowe, they've found a real gem.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think maybe his prominence in the Arsenal first team was belated, and Arteta should have called upon him earlier. He spent some time on loan at Huddersfield in difficult circumstances. I think they were battling relegation, and Emile Smith-Rowe has been highly rated by people at Arsenal for years and years, but we've heard a lot about these Arsenal youth prospects, and a lot of them, don't come off. I mean, we all remember Fran Merida, and there's a lot of names down the years from the Arsenal academy it doesn't quite happen for. So really happy to see Smith-Rowe not only in an Arsenal kit, but in an England jersey. I think he's someone who could move the needle for England in terms of chance creation, because they sort of asked their way to the Euro 2020 final, in my opinion, with a string of very narrow victories and pretty conservative style, with a double pivot with Phillips and Declan Rice. And obviously Jack Grealish was the player that people were quote-unquote clamouring for. And now the clamour has officially started for Emil Smith-Rowe to start proper serious games for England. Unfortunately, you don't get serious games in qualifying for England because they always breeze through it. There's no high pressure environments to get that experience in, and then they go to a tournament and suddenly everybody clams up. So I don't know what it is about qualifying, but I think it's something to do with the mentality of the English national team, that they can't seem to bring their best football when the heat is on. But when there's some lesser opponents to knock 7 or 8 goals past, and they're qualifying with games to spare, suddenly the handbrake comes off and they play some of their best football. But what I want to ask you, Nick, is Harry Maguire. His goal celebration against Albania drew a lot of mockery, a lot of criticism from the likes of Roy Keane. Thought it was embarrassing.
He's in the haters. He's been rubbish for 2 weeks.
It's like he's in the studio. But I had one problem with it, and that was that he both cupped his ears and then put his fingers in his ears, which seemed to send a mixed message.
Yeah. Do you want people to keep going, or are you blocking them out? It's an interesting one. I mean, fair play to him if he wants to sort of make a statement. It obviously has been tricky, and from his point of view, it can't be easy as the captain of Manchester United, as the captain of any club really, but as the captain of Manchester United in particular, given some of the results that they've had, some of the performances that he's put in. Look, I'm sure internally he'll probably look himself in the mirror and tell himself that he hasn't been good enough and that the team hasn't been good enough. But yeah, scoring in a 5-0 win against Albania and a 10-0 win against San Marino, it's not quite statement level performances.
I wouldn't have thought it was anything to crow about.
No.
I mean, and no one's saying that Harry Maguire isn't a threat off set pieces. It's been his defensive play that has drawn the eye. Maybe the time to silence the haters is not after a great last-ditch tackle or something. I think Italy have proven that particular conventional wisdom wrong.
Yeah.
I think the sort of goal celebration-esque
Bonucci and Chiellini getting
chest bumping is real dub for the defenders of the world, and more should take after them. But Harry Maguire is always in the media spotlight because he's the captain and he has to come out for these interviews. And of course, Roy Keane felt he wasn't giving his apology with requisite gusto. But when you have to apologise every week and say it's not the result we wanted, it starts to become a bit of a chore. And I'm not convinced that it is the players' place to apologise. Maybe after something like the 5-0 against Liverpool, but not every week. I mean, coming out to front up in front of the cameras, it's become this ritual of self-flagellation at Manchester United. I think I don't think it's helpful.
No, and there's been plenty of talk about the sort of social media graphics that they've put up on a number of occasions. I think the Jesse Lingard errant back pass that played in Young Boys' winner in the Champions League was one. The Bruno Fernandes missed penalty against Aston Villa was another that's sort of been mocked widely from fans from other Premier League clubs, particularly on Twitter. But it's an interesting point you raise about Maguire and his set pieces, because that was really what was the catalyst for Manchester United buying him, was that World Cup, although he had one more season at Leicester after that World Cup where he scored maybe 2 or 3 goals. I think certainly one in the quarterfinal against Sweden. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, there's results, like I said, do have England qualified and set in their place for the World Cup next year. Their last couple of major tournaments have been both positive and negative. It's interesting you mentioned the Euro 2020, as it was, final. You have England there. Whether or not they were necessarily there on merit is possibly a question for debate. And then, of course, you have Italy, who now have to go through a playoff to make next year's World Cup. They, of course, didn't qualify at all for Russia 2018. So it paints an interesting picture going forward. The Premier League, of course, as well, over this international break, released their schedule, which basically confirmed what everyone was assuming, or certainly anyone that plays Football Manager would have been able to predict it, because they've been all on top of it. Once you get into the 2021 or the 2022-2023 season, as it is, they'll take that 6-week break or whatever it is when all the countries go to Qatar, and then I think they're picking up the tools again 8 days after the World Cup final.
It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. This is going to be a disaster.
It is,
especially for England, because that's their peak, their crazy bit of the season where everyone's playing every 3 days, and it's it's football season over Christmas, and to not give obviously it's a terrible idea to play the World Cup in the middle of the season. It's obviously a terrible idea to play it in Qatar. Maybe less of a bad idea to not play it in the Qatar summer. That's probably a good move if you're going to play it in Qatar. But this scheduling, it pays almost no respect to the tournament. Not that I, think it should be there, obviously, but it doesn't seem like the players are going to have much opportunity to, play a friendly before it starts, settle into camp. I think it's going to be a terrible tournament, and the club season is going to suffer as well, because players coming straight off the back of the World Cup, especially if they go deep into the tournament, and then potential, heartbreak come the end, and lots of minutes in their legs over a short amount of time, and a country where the heat's going to be an issue even in winter, and then going straight back into the peak of the Premier League season after that. I mean, these players are getting flogged within an inch of their lives. We heard from the Belgian players, I think it was. Of course, they have a huge Premier League contingent, and I think it was after a Nations League semi-final or something.
Courtois.
It was Thibaut Courtois saying, "Why are we here? What are we playing? What is this game for? You can't be serious." How many games do we have to play in a calendar year? How many players have to get serious injuries and before they actually think about the load that these players are working under? Yeah,
and it's not just going to be that World Cup. There's probably bound to be a Copa America at some point, because there's one of those just about every year. There's
Centenario, Centenario +1.
Yeah,
Centenario
there's AFCON coming up in a couple of months as well, over the turn of the year. So, we could probably sit here all day and talk about the state of football as it is, with broadcasters and all the money that's being thrown around and everything. But we are the EPL show, so we'll stick to the EPL as it is, and a number of the budding Premier League stars that we've mentioned have helped England secure qualification for Qatar 2022. We'll take a quick break now, and on the other side of it, we previewed it a little bit, starting the show. Plenty of managerial movement going on, certainly headlined by Steven Gerrard's return to the Premier League. He'll have his debut match at Villa Park. Are they at home? They are at home against Brighton this weekend, and we'll break it down after the break.
Radford. Now Tudor's gone down for Newcastle. Radford again. Oh, what a goal! What a goal! Radford the scorer. Ronnie Radford. And the crowd are invading the pitch. And now it will take some time to clear the field. What a tremendous shot by Radford.
You're listening to FNR, Football Nation Radio.
Since 1998, Lanco Group has been providing superior civil engineering solutions and advice to developers, local government and service authorities across Australia. Lanco Group is known for delivering sustainable, efficient solutions. By working closely with clients, Lanco Group is able to meet the complex infrastructure requirements for residential, commercial and industrial developments on time, on budget. Find out more at lancogroup.com.au. Lanco Group, your business partner for engineering solutions.
Are you looking to change your destiny in life? Be your own boss? Start your own business? If you are, you need people who understand your needs and are committed to helping you make it happen. At DKP & Co Chartered Accountants, we are more than just accountants. We are business advisors, taxation consultants, and strategists that specialise in setting up businesses. We understand the client and give them the very best customised advice and strategies to achieve their goals. Visit our website, dkpco.com.au, or give us a call today on 03 9023 9370. Fast, proactive, personal. That's DKP & Co Chartered Accountants.
To the EPL show. We've covered off the international break. England are through to the World Cup for next year. Now, all the international nonsense is over. It's all about Premier League action, Champions League, Europa League, all those European competitions are finishing up, and the League Cup as well will come around before the turn of the year. But one team that's got nothing else to worry about other than picking themselves up the Premier League table is Aston Villa, and they are going to try and do that with Steven Gerrard at the helm. A massive transfer window for them in the summer after a brilliant season last season. They obviously lose Jack Grealish. It's a bit of that Gareth Bale effect. You know, Jack Grealish moves on. They've tried to replace him with three people that they would hope would become one Jack Grealish in Leon Bailey, Danny Ings, and Emi Buendia, of course, from Norwich. It hasn't quite worked. They're currently sitting 16th on the table with 10 points, just 2 points above the relegation zone. Steven Gerrard, the manager, can he be Steven Gerrard, the player? And then can he do more than Steven Gerrard, the player, and perhaps in future years and become a Premier League champion is the question. Josh, I believe you're preparing something for us.
Well, it was a pretty inauspicious departure. Yeah, this is what he said when he was asked about his future at Rangers when all the speculation was going on.
Do I look happy?
Very.
Do I look settled? Don't ask me silly questions then.
Yes, it wasn't a silly question after all.
No, not at all. That was I think that was initially referencing links to the Newcastle job, as it were, but they crossed over very quickly as soon as Dean Smith was sacked at Aston Villa. It seemed to happen very quickly from one of those that from the first little rumour that they're looking at him and then they were tying up the deal. You, I feel, have probably a stronger knowledge or have watched more of the Scottish Premier League than I have. Talk us through, I guess, your knowledge of Steven Gerrard's Rangers. Just how good were they? They went, of course, undefeated, winning the league last season. Do you think he can bring that to Aston Villa?
I'm not sure. It depends if the players sort of fit with his, his style of play. He went through quite a few different systems at Rangers before he settled on what he really wanted, and then they smashed the rest of the season. It was quite a lot of interchangeable attacking midfield players who would swap positions and sort of 4-1-4-1 shape. It was quite fluid, and they played quite narrow in the attacking midfield spots and got forward a lot with the fullbacks. So there was quite a lot of possession play. It wasn't quite as Captain Marvel crash, bang and thunder as Steven Gerrard's Liverpool career was on the pitch. I always think that managers coach how they played, but I think Gerrard has been influenced a lot by his assistants and his team, and that's really important as part of his development as a coach. that he's got an experienced backroom staff with him. And I think a lot of the tactical insight actually comes from his assistant coach.
Yeah.
But the whole team is coming with him. They've just left Jermaine Defoe behind in the Sky Sports studio. Everyone else is coming with him, so they've gutted the Rangers coaching staff. So that's good news for Villa.
Yeah,
I'm just not quite sure how I'd feel as a Villa fan, knowing that this is literally just his audition for the Liverpool job.
It's a funny sort of dynamic, isn't it? Because already it's a lot of the narrative really has nothing to do with Aston Villa. It's about Gerrard coming to the Premier League, and if this goes well, then surely he takes over from Klopp when he leaves. But if this doesn't go well, then does that spell the end of his dreams to coach Liverpool? We've seen Frank Lampard is maybe an example of him taking the job too early. So where do you think, I guess, that football nowadays seems to be in this this trend of clubs are hiring former players or legendary players. Barcelona have just done it with Xavi. I guess it remains to be seen whether that works. Juventus with Andrea Pirlo, not quite worked out. So it's what do you think about that trend? I guess that's happening.
Yeah. I think it's clubs trying to curry favour with their supporters by appointing a manager that has legendary playing experience. But what clubs don't think about when they appoint that manager is eventually, one way or another, that manager is going to leave.
Yep.
And usually you're going to sack him. And that's an awkward proposition when it's Steven Gerrard, Stevie G, Liverpool legend. I think it's way too early to think about the Liverpool job. Even, if he is successful at Villa and maybe gets them, to Premier League safety first and foremost and establishes them as a comfortable mid-table side, or even, pushes for Europa League like Martin O'Neill did back in the day with the Villains, does that qualify him for the Liverpool gig? I mean, Jurgen Klopp made the Champions League final with Borussia Dortmund and won the Bundesliga before he was considered.
Twice as well, didn't he? The Bundesliga.
Exactly. Yep. He won it twice. And, was pipped to the post in the Champions League by a last-minute Bayern Munich goal from Ian Robben. So that's a hell of an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Klopp made his way through the world of German football and now into English football purely on merit. Nobody particularly knew who he was from his playing days. He did play. He was a defender at Mainz. He always jokes about how bad he was.
Yep.
I think he exaggerates that a little bit. But, he is one of the top coaches in the world for a reason, because he spent years and years honing his craft, and Steven Gerrard simply hasn't done that. So this is a bit of a Jamie Carragher style take, but what he said at Frank Lampard, I can't really do the accent. I'd like to see him get the Chelsea job, in 10 years. Maybe that's for Stevie G. Maybe
you can get the Liverpool job there. But it's an interesting one, because Frank Lampard, certainly when he was hired, my first reaction was that is way too early. He had one season in management with Derby.
He was parachuted in because they had a transfer ban.
Yeah.
And they thought, it'll be low pressure environment for him this season. And, they didn't really have any realistic aspirations that year of challenging for the title of the Champions League. As soon as he had a transfer budget to play with, he was found out.
Yeah, I think this probably speaks about some issues at Chelsea in general as well, because there was plenty of talk after he left, even while he was there, that he didn't really even want Timo Werner. And some of the signings really were over his head. Did
he bring the Germans in, as his father-in-law said?
Yeah, exactly. And you thought that hire then had to come with time, and then of course wherever they were, 7th or 8th at whatever point, and it's worked out for Chelsea in the end. Clearly, Thomas Tuchel's come in, won them a Champions League, and has them at the moment on top of the Premier League and on course for a very strong title push. But the backroom staff is something that you mentioned as well. I work a little bit with a few Scottish guys that obviously follow the Scottish Premier League closely, and one of them said that it really is down to Michael Beale, who is the Steven Gerrard's assistant. He was the academy director, I believe. He was certainly the under-23s manager at Liverpool around the same time. He was for a number of years. And then, of course, Gerrard's first taste of management was with the under-18s at Liverpool. Curtis Jones was the captain of that side a few years ago. So it seems that a lot of the wisdom behind the scenes comes from Michael Beale. Even with Jurgen Klopp, he has always said that he's just the manager, he's just the face of it, and he takes expertise from Željko Buvac, who's now moved on. He always used to say that none of their success would have happened without him, without Peter Kravitz, the other assistant coach as well. Gary McAllister.
Is that mini Klopp with the glasses and the
No,
beard?
that's Andreas Kornmeier. He's the fitness guy. Peter Kravitz is the real big one with the booming voice. Gary McAllister, former obviously Liverpool legend. Maybe legend is a bit of a stretch, but icon at least is the,
certainly favoured personnel in football manager terms.
For sure.
I mean, he won a Scouts treble.
They're the trio that are coming in, so it'll be interesting to see. And look, the Villa squad has the quality. We've mentioned those players that they brought in. We saw the success that they had last season. So
was it premature, the sacking of Dean Smith? I think it was.
Yeah, I was surprised by it. I mean,
you just ripped out the best player that your club has had in the modern era, probably. Certainly in the last decade, Jack Grealish was the best player and probably the most important player to any Premier League team as an individual. And he's gone, yes, you get £100 million. Yes, you invest in the squad, and there's a big transfer spend there, of course, over a number of years. But wouldn't you expect a period of getting used to life without Jack? Because you've seen Villa play without him when he was injured or whatnot before, and they were terrible. So, of course, there was going to be an adjustment period, a grace period, and the players that they've bought, with the exception of Ings, who, of course, is a ready-made, successful striker, are more sort of moneyball signings for the future that might attract big fees from other clubs. They're young, early 20s players like Buendia and Leon Bailey in particular, who probably won't hit their peak for another 3 or 4 years. So I think expecting results straight away was a bit naive from the Villa ownership.
Yeah, the Grealish thing is a good one that you mentioned, because when he was injured for a fair portion of the back half of last season, that was really when their European push hit the rocks. And it's been shown countless times. I mentioned Gareth Bale, Luis Suarez when he left Liverpool, Eden Hazard when he left Chelsea. Obviously, that did coincide with Lampard coming in and the transfer ban or whatever. And I do believe they still made the top 4 in the end anyway. Yeah,
they just snuck in on the final day, as I recall.
Yeah, so there is that hangover when a star player leaves, especially when he's a captain. And, where Jack Grealish for a very long time was the crown jewel of Aston Villa, when he wasn't being pictured in some unfortunate scenarios when he was a younger wee lad.
I think he was still the crown prince in a different way.
Very true. But yeah, it's and I think we've seen previously as well clubs that have had sort of those bolter kind of seasons. The next season, they ultimately have a little bit of that hangover. I'll never forget when Birmingham had an absolutely fantastic campaign with Alex McLeish. They came 8th and then ended up in Europe, and then they were relegated the season after. I remember the same thing happened with Stoke when they, I think they lost the FA Cup final to Man City, but got into Europe. Mm-hmm. Perhaps that's a more European thing. But even more recently, we've seen Leicester, season after they won the Premier League, perhaps a little bit more severe because that Premier League title was just a stuff of legend, so to speak. But they had a drop off. Southampton had a really positive end to 2 seasons ago, were a bit meh last season. They've stuck with Ralph Hasenhüttl, which is interesting to compare. A couple other managerial changes, and the one we're talking about surprising managerial changes, waking up and finding out that Daniel Farke had been sacked by Norwich City after they got their first win of the Premier League season. How on earth does that make sense?
Winning games. We don't do that here. Yeah. It's bad for the brand. I mean, look, the only piece of silverware Norwich are going to win is the championship over and over again, and if Daniel Farke's desire to win Premier League matches gets in the way of that silverware, then he's got to go. Ridiculous. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, what do you expect when you don't invest in the squad?
Yeah.
I think Villa have gone too hard in one direction with signing too many players and trying to incorporate them all immediately. But I think they will improve in the second half of the year. Gerrard aside, Dean Smith aside, whoever's in charge, those players are going to gel and they're going to improve. Norwich have gone with basically the same squad with a number of players poached, including, Buendia, of course, who's their playmaker as they strolled to championship success last season. And, surprisingly, they're the worst team in the league. It happened 2 seasons ago as well, exactly the same way. So, if you're not willing to invest from ownership perspective to stay in the league, and you don't have to go crazy like Fulham did, then I don't see how you stay up. I don't see what Daniel Farke could have really done differently. Maybe he's too ambitious with his style of play with the players at his disposal, but you knew that when you hired him. So it doesn't quite make sense to me. And they've got Dean Smith in. He's straight back into employment after being sacked by his boyhood club.
8 days it took him to find another Premier League job, which is the quickest turnaround for a manager between jobs in the Premier League in history, as you could imagine.
It's crazy. He shouldn't have been sacked, and he probably shouldn't have been hired. But he's got a job again. So good on Dean Smith.
Yeah,
I don't see them staying up.
No.
I think he's a good man for the job. Whether he can sort of handle the emotional roller coaster of the 8 days is another thing. It'll take some adjustment from a human level, but as a coach, I think he's a very good one. But I still don't think they stay up in the Premier League. I think it's a real tough ask.
Yeah, I'm just looking up now the route from Birmingham to Norwich. 2 hour, 56-minute drive. Could split that over 8 days. That's a handful of minutes each day. Yeah, exactly. Norwich, it's a sad one because when they do connect with, or certainly have connected with some of that football, that bold football that you mentioned that Daniel Farke liked to play, they've looked really good. But it's perhaps that naivety, or at times they've changed from a back three sort of just randomly for a couple of games, and they've tinkered with formations, and I think they have brought players in that maybe just haven't worked. I think Milot Rashica from Werder Bremen, he was a very exciting signing, but he just hasn't cut it. Matthias Norman is one that has done well. He's on loan from Rostov in Russia, but I mean, Billy Gilmore is now bizarrely sort of frozen out of the team after initially playing quite a bit in the early part of the season. I remember he was very good against Liverpool on opening day. The couple of Greek guys that they got, Dimitris Giannoulis in particular, also was very good in that Liverpool game. Josh Sargent hasn't really transitioned in yet. So
there's an Irish contingent there, which is not, they're playing international football and starting games for the Republic of Ireland now. In Ida and Omabama Delhi at centre back as well.
Yeah. Kenny McLean as well. He's Irish.
It's a championship level squad.
Scottish.
It's a championship level squad. So, like some of the names you mentioned could prove to be shrewd pickups or break through and prove to be maybe Premier League level talent, but they'll be few and far between. They're a yo-yo team, and they're going to remain that way, I think. Yeah, they are stuck in quite an awful no man's land. I think we've had teams that have come up and up and down. Previously, I think West Brom is a more recent example of that. Hull City maybe towards the early part of the 2010s were up and down a little bit, but I've really never seen anything like it with this Norwich team where they can just boss the championship. The last 2 times they've been in the championship, they have won the league by a mile. And now as soon as they go up to the Premier League, it's just whatever happens that it's, the way they play, they're good when they're playing on the front foot against, and when they're the favourite in the game and they can afford to be the proactive team. But when you try and play that way against superior opposition and you don't really have an underdog game plan, it's hard to survive. I applaud them for trying to play some football and, not Sean Dyche their way to survival. But it's not a great underdog strategy to expose yourself to that level of risk in possession. So maybe that's why Norwich have decided a change is in order. But maybe if they get relegated, which they probably will anyway, maybe Daniel Farke can come back and get them promoted again.
Possibly.
Because he could be a promotion specialist.
Yeah.
They do exist. There's plenty of them in the English game, usually more local British managers. But
Neil Warnock, one of them.
Exactly. There are a few guys that know how to game the championship with their specific system.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I mean, it obviously is early days, so the gaps between teams aren't fully formed yet. They are only 5 points adrift of 17th at the moment. So if Dean Smith can come in and pull something mad off, it's not quite 100% away from them yet. I think, sort of mathematically and from a literal sense, certainly from just an eye test point of view, it looks like there's no way they can stay up. But perhaps Dean Smith can work some magic. And the one other new managerial appointment is, on equal points with Norwich City. No wins so far for them this season. Just the 5 draws, 6 defeats in 11 games for Newcastle United, the newly cashed up Newcastle United. And Eddie Howe is finally back in Premier League management, but in any management, of course, we know what ended up with Celtic in the summer, and obviously our Ange has landed there. I'm not sure about this one. I think Eddie Howe, look, he did very well with Bournemouth for a few years, but that team really stagnated, and I think he did very little to turn it around in a more positive direction. So
he made some terrible buys as well. I'm not sure
Solanke and Jordan Ibe.
how he's going to go with a £200 million transfer kitty, because I think he's leaving at the end of the season, but Michael Edwards will be licking his lips knowing how much money Eddie Howe has to spend.
One last parting gift. We'll be getting $30 million from Newcastle for, I don't know who,
Kia
Nico Williams
or whatever.
He's already at Wolves.
Is he?
Unfortunately,
Okay.
he would have been
already cashed in on him.
He would have been a nice one. Or maybe Nat Phillips. There you go.
Yeah,
Newcastle would say Nat Phillips.
$30 million for Nat Phillips. Cha-ching.
I would absolutely love that just quietly. But yeah, Newcastle. One of the few predictions you mentioned, my Crystal Palace prediction that we're not going to talk about. Aston Villa, I predicted them to be quite high on the table.
I think everybody got sucked in by the Villa hype.
Although you didn't, I remember that.
I didn't. Okay, well that's good. That's good to know. I don't remember.
I think you had them sort of
mid-table,
10th or below, maybe just below. But Newcastle, I think, was one that I did pin in the relegation zone pre-season. They're sitting there now, like I said, with no wins. What do you think Eddie Howe needs to do? He's got his boy Callum Wilson back, and Ryan Fraser, of course, is in the mix. Can he bring something out of them? Look, they do have some talent. Alan Saint-Maximin is obviously a brilliant player. Joel Linton was very good in the Bundesliga, hasn't brought that across to the Premier League. What can... Oh, Matt Ritchie, of course. Goodness, it is a bit of a Bournemouth reunion, this team. So what do you think Eddie Howe can bring something out of these players and take Newcastle back?
Well, there'll be goodwill from the fans, less so from opposition fans for obvious reasons. The best covered by more serious news outlets than ours. But look, until they get an opportunity to spend, I don't think it's going to change markedly. Just the managerial change will lift spirits, I think, because Steve Bruce was just such a persona non grata is the expression I was reaching for there. On Tyneside, they just didn't like him, and he was never. They made their mind up about him very early that he was a cheap option, that he was a instrument of a regime that they didn't support. And now Eddie Howe is the new man. I think will be greeted with open arms. He tries to play a more proactive, more possession-focused style of football, where Steve Bruce was very much sort of 5-4-1 or 4-5-1 counter-attacking. The thing I'm really interested in is whether Alan Saint-Maximin fits into a team concept, because he's the most individualistic player in the Premier League, and he's fantastic to watch. a bit like Adama Traore, except maybe leaning more towards the step overs and less towards the road runner speed.
He can actually sort of cross a ball as well, Alan, so Maximin.
Yeah, true. But there's that similar level
that
of
explosiveness,
trickery, and individualism that makes them stand out. And you sit up and take notice and go, these guys aren't passing. It's it's like the kid in the Goal movie. He's just taking on players over and over again, and he gets a lecture from his manager. And I think
the scouts sitting on the sidelines, pass it, Santiago.
Pass it. You know why we pass? Because the ball is faster than you.
Yeah, the classic under 11s coaching move. Yeah. Right, now, so if I kick the ball and you try and run after it, which one's going to be quicker?
So I think Eddie Howe might have to have the same conversation with Mr. Gucci Headbands, and it could be an interesting one because it's going to be a huge change in style for him. For the team, obviously, I think it's a positive. I'm not sure if the ownership know what they're doing, because going after Unai Emery and then Eddie Howe seems to suggest you have no idea what style of football you want to play, or what kind of personality you want in the dugout. They're just going for a name that has a CV, I suppose. So don't love the organisation behind the scenes, but Eddie Howe should be an improvement on Steve Bruce, which for Newcastle fans in their assessment of Steve Bruce as a manager, which I think is slightly harsh, that's not difficult bar to clear.
Yeah, I do feel for Steve Bruce, and he had that quote sort of on his way out about how it's affected him and his family, and how it's.
I thought you were going to say he said, "How's the bacon?" Did you say?
They're doing a kebab, but. And how he said that it's probably going to be his last job in management, because he really couldn't take it anymore, which is unfortunate, because he's had a great career in football, not so much as a manager in a top flight level. He had a couple of promotions with did he get Sunderland up? I'm not sure, but he definitely had promotion with Hull. Yeah, he left before Dean Smith took over at Aston Villa, and
he seems like a nice guy as well.
He does,
the level of hatred for him is so over the top.
Yeah,
and I guess it's more directed towards Mike Ashley for hiring him in the first place and not paying Rafa Benitez what he wanted, or giving him the resources he needed. And so that was the resentment he came in with, is discount Rafa essentially. Very
true, and he did well. Like this Newcastle team, I mentioned that I had them pinned for relegation. A lot of people have been, for a few years, predicting Newcastle to go down every time. They came 12th last season, above Wolves, Southampton, Brighton, for example. The season before, I don't actually know if he managed the season before. I'm pretty sure he did. 13th, again, above West Ham and Aston Villa, who are now, sort of on paper better than them. So harsh on Steve Bruce.
Was surprisingly porous in comparison to Rafa. I was looking at the stats, and Newcastle finished in pretty respectable ladder positions, as you say, but they shipped a lot more goals, which is surprising when you think of him as quite a pragmatic coach.
Yeah.
So maybe he lacked the level of tactical detail and insight that Rafa has in order to organise a backline. Now, that's certainly something that Newcastle fans would have been annoyed about, but they scored a similar amount of goals. Rafa was a pretty defensive manager, maybe out of necessity with the resources, but I don't think they played markedly different styles of football. So it seems as if there are, dare I say, delusions of grandeur on the tune. No more, because they have a transfer war chest to match the ambitions of their fans.
Yeah, and I mean, if they're not happy with conceding goals, then Eddie Howe is going to bring something all the more frustrating for them. I think you look at some of the numbers of Bournemouth's Premier League seasons, well over 60 goals conceded each year. Yes, maybe it's counteracted by a fairly decent goal return that they had most years, and that they were competing around the top half for a few years. But yeah, I'm not too big a fan of this one. I think there was a lot of hype around Eddie Howe about his potential to be an England manager, or I remember he was heavily linked with the Arsenal job at one point, and I just don't quite see it myself. I think the way that it ended up at Bournemouth, yes, a good couple of seasons for a brief period of time, but the way they sort of went down really without a fight, I think didn't reflect too well on him. But he's had a couple of years out of the game
get them
now.
up twice. Was it 2 promotions or 3?
Over a few years, I think it was.
Yeah, but it was a very small club.
Yeah,
the buzz generated around that place was unbelievable. Like, it was an unthinkable feat to get them into the Premier League, and we became used to them because they survived for so long.
That's true.
So I think assessing him based on the latter years of his reign, even if he did make some expensive transfer mistakes and so forth, I think it might be slightly unfair. Is the Newcastle job too big for him? I think we'll have to wait and see. He seems like the only available manager who wanted to take it, not necessarily the best coach they could have gone out and got. But I still think he's a good coach.
Yeah, well, like you said, we'll have to wait and see how he fits in at Newcastle. He'll have his first game at home against Brentford, incidentally, the team that just lost to handed Norwich their first win of the season. So will they hand Newcastle their first win of the season? We'll take one last break and come back and preview the rest of the fixtures for the Premier League's return. Don't miss it.
Maloney takes, and it's in! It's Ben Watson! It's Ben Watson for Wigan Athletic! They've surely won the FA Cup! For Dave Whelan, for Roberto Martinez! You just cannot write scripts like this!
Since 1998, Lanco Group has been providing superior civil engineering solutions and advice to developers, local government and service authorities across Australia. Lanco Group is known for delivering sustainable, efficient solutions. By working closely with clients, Lanco Group is able to meet the complex infrastructure requirements for residential, commercial and industrial developments on time, on budget. Find out more at lancogroup.com.au. Lanco Group, your business partner for engineering solutions.
To the EPL Show. We're into injury time, Fergie time, if you like. We're wrapping up with our final segment, just looking ahead at the weekend's fixtures. As has been mentioned, we're done with international football for quite a while now. I think the next international break usually comes around February or March, so we have lots of Premier League action. The midweek games are going to start coming heading into December as well. But looking no further than this week, and then the first game of this round is a very interesting one with Leicester City hosting Chelsea. I think Leicester, by their lofty ambitions in the last couple of years, probably haven't been as good as they would have liked or would have expected so far this season. Chelsea, on the other hand, topping the table at the moment, looking very solid. How do you see this one playing out? Because I think Leicester, just as it seemed that they were maybe sort of starting to turn a corner. They had 4 games unbeaten, albeit draws with Burnley and Crystal Palace that maybe they would have liked to have won. They beat Manchester United, beat Brentford away, which is proving to be a tough fixture, but a quite insipid defeat against Arsenal and a draw against struggling Leeds in their last game maybe has put that little resurgence on ice at the moment. So how do you see this one turning out, and how do you see Leicester's season unfolding? Because, Brendan Rodgers is still a name linked with the Manchester United job as well, so that could throw another spanner in the works.
I think he's slowly going about tainting the reputation he's rebuilt for himself this season. I don't think it's quite caught up to him yet, but seeing him as a realistic proposition for a big job means that he has to achieve something tangible with Leicester City. And so often they're in the mix for a Champions League place, as a real underdog in that race. And so often on the last few weeks of the season, they bottle it when it counts. And thinking back to certain Liverpool fixtures that may or may not have let slip a title race lead, doesn't paint a great picture for Brendan Rodgers. I think he's chopping and changing too much this season. There's too much inconsistency in the starting lineup. Yes, they've had injuries, but he still doesn't really know what his best team is. and it's hurting them. They have no fluency in this side, no consistency. So, Manchester United, I think a lot of people watched that game and got a false impression of how good Leicester City are because United made them look a lot better than they really are. So I'm going for Chelsea in this game.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Leicester will continue to be an interesting story because if we're talking about sort of Aston Villa in a team that's underperforming expectations, if on one hand, if Rodgers is going to be consistently linked with the Manchester United job, he might actually have to be looking the other way and making sure that the Leicester-shaped alligator isn't snapping at his ankles, if you like, to use some sort of random analogy that I've put together there.
Crikey.
They sit 12th. I mean, what are we? 15 points, which is level with Palace and Everton. A win, or within a win of 6th, which is Manchester United on 17th. So, again, in this formative part of the Premier League season, the gaps are always quite close, but with games like Chelsea still to play, I don't think they've played Liverpool either. Off the top of my head, I don't think we've played them yet. They need to start picking up some results, and it is these next few weeks where the table is going to start taking shape. So a positive result in this game would be massive for Leicester. They beat Chelsea in the FA Cup final.
They did.
Did they?
Tielemans with the long range belter.
Yeah, so perhaps they can channel some of that Wembley magic. Newcastle and Brentford we mentioned earlier. Eddie Howe's first game. I was just looking at the table before. I'm shocked that Brentford are only 14th on 12 points. I thought they were much higher than that.
Have you been reading XG tables again?
Yeah, possibly I have. Or maybe I'm just still shivering from the 3-3 draw that Liverpool had at the Brentford Community Stadium.
I think this is going to be a bit of a wet blanket, this one. I think it's going to be an underwhelming 1-1. I think often when new managers come in, they keep it simple and keep it tight. And I don't think Eddie Howe's really going to go for the jugular in this one, knowing that Brentford can hit in transition so effectively as they did against Liverpool. So I think it'll be probably a 1-1, hopefully not a 0-0, but I think it's going to be a draw. I'm
going to go for Brentford. I really like what they're doing. I think they can take the win despite the inevitable Eddie Howe or new manager effect that does seem to happen. Burnley and Crystal Palace is perhaps pre-season we would have been looking at this fixture thinking two teams towards the bottom of the table. As it is, only one team towards the bottom of the table. That's Burnley, who are the other side in the bottom three alongside Newcastle.
I think this one's
Norwich.
obvious. It's got to be a Crystal Palace win, surely.
Yeah.
I mean, they're flying at the moment.
Yep.
England debutant Conor Gallagher can no longer be asked to check his grandparents' birthplaces.
Yeah.
He's definitely playing for the Three Lions, and that's a feather in the cap of Patrick Vieira and Wilf Zaha are still outstanding for a team at that level. So yeah, I'm going for a Crystal Palace win. Burnley, I think this might be the season where the wheels come off.
Yeah, they're another one like Newcastle where a lot of people each year predict that this is going to be the one where they go down, and Sean Dyche always manages to propel them up to 8th or 9th or 10th or just keep them safe. But certainly early doors, they look to have lost a lot of, what's been, I say great, probably successful is the better term because it's not really great to watch, but it's been successful for them is the productivity that they've got out of Chris Wood and Ashley Barnes mainly as the front two. They've brought Maxwell Cornet in who's been scoring quite a few goals. Dwight McNeil hasn't really had as much of an impact this season as he has in previous campaigns.
It's so Sean Dyche to look at a guy who's played as an attacking wing back in Ligue 1 in Maxwell Cornet and go, right, that's a striker.
So good. That's when I remember when he signed, everyone sort of looked up and thought, what's this, an attacking fullback? What is going on at Burnley? But no. Turns out the plan was to pop him up front all along. Aston Villa and Brighton. This one is a really interesting game because I'm very publicly a massive fan of Brighton, and finally I've been backed up. Last year I supported them all season, and they just continued to drop in Brentford-esque XG performances and not win.
XGFC.
They're now showing it that they can do it. They're in 7th.
They're actually outperforming their XG, would you believe, in the
But
points
believe it
table.
or not, they've only lost 2 games, which only Liverpool and Chelsea have lost 1.
But there's a new manager bounce.
Exactly. And it is one Steven Gerrard that we have mentioned.
I'm still going to go for Brighton in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go draw. I'm going to go draw. I think Brighton, very good. Aston Villa, also, I really do think their potential is very high. It's interesting as well looking at this period that Gerrard's coming into. Brighton, Crystal Palace, Man City, Leicester and Liverpool. The first 5 games for Aston Villa. So that could be...
Baptism of fire.
Absolutely. If ever I saw...
I can't wait for the Liverpool game. That's going to be so good.
It's going to be huge. Yeah, coming to Anfield on December 12. Watford, Manchester United.
Watford.
They can't lose that.
Watford. I don't want to talk about it, but I'm picking Watford.
Do you actually think that?
I do, actually.
Interesting. Why?
Josh King is going to score 5. I think United are in a really bad place at the moment when it comes to their squad composition and the manager being torn between what's been successful for him in the past and what he feels he should do as Manchester United manager. Got to play with wingers. You got to get the ball in the box. You got to play attacking football. It's the United way. It's in the DNA. And in fact, the most successful performances of his reign have been much more transitional and counter-attacking. Playing the likes of Greenwood and Rashford up top and getting the ball to them quickly, as opposed to trying to dominate games as they did in their 90s heyday. So
in some ways, Solskjaer sort of provided the blueprint to beating Man City a couple of years ago when they did the double over Pep side in the Premier League, and it was
and
exactly
then abandoned
what you said.
that blueprint.
Yeah, and were just god awful in the last Manchester derby before the international break. Surely they can't lose to Watford, so I'm going to go with a Manchester United win. But do you
dilly ding, dilly dong?
Potentially,
Ranieri.
But can you see? There's been so much talk about Solskjaer. It's getting a little old now, but can you see him getting sacked at some point?
He will get sacked at some point, but it's not going to be during the season.
Point, but yeah, you think they'll leave it to the end?
If you can lose 5-0 to Liverpool at home and keep your job, you're not getting sacked during the season.
Yeah.
And they will get to a point where they can no longer mathematically qualify for the Champions League. And then with however many games left, there'll be a caretaker. That's the pattern we see at Manchester United. They don't like to change coaches during the season. I guess, was Mourinho an exception to that rule? I think there was a mid-season change, but that was like pure toxic dressing room atmosphere. That became urgent.
Yeah,
in a way.
For
I think Mourinho, was about to file the paperwork himself because it was just no longer tenable. I think United bereft of options to replace him as well. I mean, who comes in?
They lost out on
Pochettino's in the job. They
lost out on Antonio Conte. It's potentially a major sliding doors moment had Spurs beaten United a couple of weeks ago rather than the other way around. Would United have pulled the trigger and got Conte? Talking of Manchester United managers or ex-managers, David Moyes' was a 7-year contract is probably only just expired recently. But he's, he has, you have to take your hat off to him because certainly his first stint at West Ham was diabolical. He was poor at Sunderland. He went to Real Sociedad and couldn't pronounce Illaramendi's last name in the press conference and just had no clue what was going on.
I think the
there.
highlight of that was when he got sent to the stands and a fan offered him a chip. That was good. That was at the new camp.
Yeah.
He didn't cover himself in glory over in Spain. He didn't look ready or qualified for that position, and he didn't know the league, and it didn't work out for him. And you've seen Real Sociedad's success since then, showing that they actually had a lot of potential as a club.
Very true.
I have to take my hat off to him because he's playing a very old-fashioned style of Premier League football from the mid-2000s and getting results with it. I mean, West Ham aren't amazing to watch. They're a counter-attacking side. They have a big striker that they launch balls to if they need to. Declan Rice is playing as that box-to-box bulldozing presence with, Premier League games at a higher pace and a little bit more chaotic than international football. I think that suits his skill set. But, Moyes came to West Ham and gave that very bold press conference first time around when he said, I win. That's what I do. I win. And he got widely clowned for it, but he's proven all the doubters wrong.
Absolutely. And you love to see it. And looking at the table, they're third really on merit at the moment, level with Man City. You talk about the style of football that they're playing. It is fast, explosive on the counter-attack, but they've scored 23 goals. Man City have only scored 22. So if you look at City as a benchmark sort of attacking football, they've put more goals in the back of the net than Man City. I think they'll beat Wolves this weekend.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think the Hammers are looking very strong. And there's a lot of talk. Andy Townsend after on the commentary after West Ham beat Liverpool said, they're doing well, but I can't see them making the top four and, it'll sort of drop off at the end. I think, why not? Why can't they make the top four? I think certainly while, United and, Arsenal are having a little bit of an upturn in form, but, Tottenham have been poor, Leicester have been poor. While all these sides are tripping over each other, why can't West Ham maintain this and keep it going? We'll rattle through the last few. Southampton to beat Norwich, I think, is probably a universal
lock step on that one.
Liverpool-Arsenal, still the fixture that has the most Premier League goals in history. Pakua is again with ears pricked up behind the glass. Yes, of course, Andreas Schaven. A lot of the goals in the fixture, certainly of late, have been scored by Liverpool. There have been a number of significant wins. I think last year was, off the top of my head, I think both were 3-0 or 3-1. There's been 5-1 at Anfield. There's been 4-0 at Anfield recently for Liverpool. It seems to be a fixture that Liverpool have a handle of, and I do think we will beat Arsenal, although I have to go on record, and I hope Pakua is listening. I am a massive fan of Arsenal. I said this in our previous show as well. I really, really like what they're doing. I love Smith Rowe and Saka and these younger players that are coming up. I've liked the signings. Tommy Asu looks brilliant. Ben White is maybe a little bit slower, but he looks good. Ramsdale's come in and done very well. So I do like Arsenal. I think they're a shout for top four, but I think Liverpool will be too strong.
Yeah, Arsenal are fifth place, and that's exactly where they deserve to be because they can beat the sides below them, but they can't seem to crack the top four and the big teams. They just don't play well against them. They can't boss those games. Against the sort of lower 2/3 of the Premier League, they can have most of the possession and be patient and create chances through their creative talents like Smith Rowe and Odegaard. But against the big clubs, they're found wanting, and I think that pattern will continue. Look, Arsenal spend a lot of money. I don't think it's Mikel Arteta and Edu and co finding uncut gems. They spent 50 million on Ben White and 40 or 30 million on Ramsdale.
Very expensive.
They've come at a cost. They've come at a premium. But most of those guys, especially Tommy Asu,
and he was about the cheapest of the lot as well.
Yeah, exactly. Have really come off. There's less creative burden on players like, obviously he's injured at the moment, isn't he? Granit Xhaka, but they've relied on him for creativity in years past. They don't rely on him anymore. I think that's a very good move to play with these two number 10s, and Thomas Partey adds a lot of the bite in midfield that they've been missing, but I still don't think they're quite at the level yet of Liverpool, City, Chelsea, and that's why I think Liverpool's going to win.
Yeah, it will be one to keep an eye on, certainly if you like to watch games with goals, because as history tells us, there should be plenty at Anfield.
Last two
then. City and Everton. I think Everton might steal this.
Ooh.
I think Rafa has surprised me, to be honest. Although the last couple of weeks...
They're so inconsistent. I can't get a read on Everton at all.
The last couple of weeks, they've been quite poor. I mean, the Tottenham game was just a ridiculously boring 0-0 draw. Prior to that, 3 losses in a row. That followed that Manchester United game, which they really should have won. And then, losses against West Ham. They were beating Watford and then conceded 4 goals in the last 10 minutes, most of them to Josh King. And then a loss to a Wolves side that are slightly resurgent themselves. But Damari Gray's impressed me for Everton. I think you talk about a blueprint for beating Pep. I remember Newcastle did beat them when Rafa was the manager. I think they maybe could spring a little upset.
Can't follow you on it. Everton, I think we're going to have to get a Liverpool-based journo on to talk us through Everton, because I just don't understand them.
Yeah.
I don't know what style of football they play. I don't know how good they are. It's so wildly inconsistent. And that Watford result really threw a spanner in the works of everybody's opinion of them. So maybe that was a fluke result, but I don't think they're going to beat City. And last one, Tottenham Leeds United.
Maybe it's more out of hope than actual genuine prediction that I'm tipping Everton. But Tottenham really frustrate me, and I think Conte coming in, it might take a little bit more time for him to sort of put his stamp on things.
Tottenham don't keep the ball very well.
No,
they can't pass.
Yeah,
and that's a problem.
The midfield, I think, has really been found out this season so far. I think Oliver Skipp, he's still young. He's been highly rated at the club. Jose Mourinho, I remember, touted him as a future captain. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg had a good season last year, and I really liked him at Southampton. But those two, and Dele Alli's trying to have some sort of resurgence. Sure. It's just not working. I don't really like it, to be honest. But Leeds, I mean, if they were in better form, I'd probably have tipped Leeds to win this. But they've started the season quite poorly. So I'm going to go with a draw.
I have it down as a draw as well. And I think Conte is going to keep it tight and play the sort of leaders in the dressing room in the first few games, the big personalities who stand out to him. And then as he gets more of a handle on the squad, I think we'll see some changes in midfield. I want Ndombele to play every available minute, but is he a Conte player? I'm not sure. Depends on what formation they pick. If they go 3-4-3, he's simply not... I don't think he's going to play in an inside forward role, and he can't survive in a double pivot like that. If they play 3-5-2 with a midfield, which gives him a bit more protection, then Ndombele could play the Paul Pogba role that he played at Juventus so well at the sort of left side of the three-man midfield with a box-to-box player and a number 6 behind him. That could be the perfect spot for a guy who was a very expensive transfer, has a lot of ability, but has never truly been trusted by any Tottenham manager. So I hope he plays. I hope Tottenham finds some midfielders who can pass it to their teammate and not to the opposition. But, Conte is fresh into the job, and I don't think he's going to find the formula just yet. So draw for me.
Yeah, it's going to be an intriguing battle, Bielsa versus Conte, and it leads the very high tempo. Conte probably.
There's some marquee managers in this league this season. It's unbelievable.
It's even
and then there's Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Even when Conte was at Chelsea, for quite a few years now, there've been some real top class coaches in the Premier League. But we'll leave it there on this first episode of.
I'd call it a pilot episode.
Yeah.
We're going to have some overseas contributors over the course of the season.
Yes, we will. We must.
We've intentionally gone late at night to get the time difference to the UK so that we can chat to the journalists and the personalities from over in the UK and get some our local expertise to add to our, because we watch in the middle of the night, sometimes we can't see straight.
Bleary-eyed.
So it's helpful to get that local knowledge. But that's the plan going forward.
Yeah, so a fantastic first episode. Look forward to speaking to some interesting people in the coming weeks, having a little bit more structure. Hopefully we get a nice little show intro as well done.
We'll have some commentary.
Episode.
There's plenty to choose from for the sizzle reel.
Absolutely.
For the Premier League.
There better be some Peter Drury commentating over Mo Salah in there. Thank you very much for tuning in. I've been Nick Hughes. He's been Josh Parrish. We'll see you again for the EPL show next week.